I'm super stoked to have you all here in our very first Printify Tech Talks. This is an event series that we will try to have ongoing continuously. And I'm super excited about our first guest speaker, Daniel Graf from Uber. He has such an amazing experience, and we had so great opportunity today working together with him and learn from his experience and his advice at Printify. So I'm super glad that we have the opportunity and that he agreed to share some of that this evening with all of the tech community in Riga. Just to have some feeling about who is in the crowd. How many founders do we have in the crowd? Okay. How many product managers do we have? Equally as much. How many engineers? Okay, quite good. How many marketing people? Do we have? Is there anybody we don't have? Anyway, I'm super glad that we tried to specifically invite and craft this event for operators, for people who are building companies, who are every day dealing with the struggle of building a successful tech company, and we will try to have speakers who will help to solve some of these challenges. So the setup for today's event will be that we will spend around 10 minutes just to introduce Daniel with his background. So I will ask him some questions, and then the rest of 1 hour he will use this white space to summarize all the topics you guys would like him to speak about and learn, and he will talk about these topics. It's a great pleasure to have Daniel Graf, who visits Europe very rarely, and he paid his time to come and visit us in Riga, Latvia. So let's give him a big round of applause and welcome him on stage. Thank you one more time for coming. We really appreciate, especially. So, originally you are from Switzerland, am I right? From a small town called
Marbach, yeah.
Marbach.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of research, and so a quick intro about Daniel. So he got his first computer at the age of 13, if I'm right, from one of your interviews.
8 years ago, yeah. That's right.
You then went to study software electric engineering at the university in Switzerland. And later you went to study software engineering in United States. Is that accurate?
Correct.
How did you, one of the things is, like, from your interviews, you made it sound super simple, that you just magically get these scholarships in United States, but it must be super hard. Like, do you purposely make it sound easy? Or is it just easy for you?
No, I don't think so. By the way, I think we have a little bit of an echo here on the microphone. If we can tune it a little bit. So first of all, it's an honor to be here. I haven't seen your beautiful city because I told friends I'm going to Riga. I was like, the city is beautiful. I arrived at around 1 p.m. and then it was raining, and it's like, thanks for the welcome. But the sun was out. Oh, it's still out right now a little bit, so I hope I see a little bit later tonight or tomorrow. So thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Never been to your country. I've been once to Tallinn, one of your neighbors or close neighbors, but never been here. And then a tech talk where I can drink a beer. That's very unique as well. So I like that. I have a little bit of sore throat, so hopefully this is helping. Now back to James' question on the education side. Yeah, it's a little more than 8 years ago. To be honest, it wasn't that hard. I just wasn't ready to get started. Well, in Switzerland we have a different system. I don't know if you have that here. We do apprenticeships. Do you guys have the system of an apprenticeship? So what that means is you actually become first a profession. I became an electronic specialist. I worked for Leica. You might know the camera, or they do measurement instruments as well, Geosystems. And I did that for 4 years. And you go to school as well while you do that. And 85% of people in Switzerland actually do that. 15% go to high school. And then you do a high school, while you learn that, you do a high school on the side, and then you can go undergrad from both paths. And after 3 years of undergrad, it's a 3-year undergrad, or back then it was, I just wasn't ready to go back into the workforce. I wanted to see something new, and I got just, it's not easy. I just got also very lucky, I would say, that I got an opportunity to go to the US to get a master's degree there, and it was a phenomenal experience, just a different environment, different cultures, different values, and never made it back to Switzerland to live there again. I was there this morning. I was with my mom this morning, so I still go back occasionally.
And so once you went to the United States, I understand that also started your journey into entrepreneurship, because one thing I find fascinating about Daniel is that first he is a founder, and only then he is this corporate guy of having worked at Google, Twitter, Uber. But first you were a founder. You have 2 of your own startups that you have co-founded. So can you share, like, the first startup, if I understand correctly, you called it the world's first jukebox, or AKA the world's first iPod. So can you share more about that?
Sure, absolutely. It's a while ago. Who remembers CDs in here? Music CDs, most of you. Okay, that's good. You remember tapes too? Okay, me too. I'm not going to ask the rest of the audience. So that was in '99. I wasn't technically a founder. I was number 3. There were 2 founders, and I was the first guy who came in. And what it was is, out of grad school, actually, I was still working on my degree. MP3 just started, the digital format of music MP3, which we all use now and never ever think about it again. And we built literally out of a garage, the world's first MP3 jukebox. It looked like a tank, like a CD player. You can put your CDs in, you can hook up your TVs, create your playlist. It records all the music on an internal hard drive. And it was a phenomenal experience, because it was hardware and software, and we created our own assembly line. We hired some freelancers who came and assembled these boxes, and we had no clue about it, and somehow it worked out. We didn't really know much about business. We were just geeky engineers. So just for those who are for example, in pricing, our hardware cost, I think it was like $600. I'm like, well, then let's sell it for 800. We make 200 profit. Of course, it never works like that. And we started selling for 800. Of course, you don't make money with that. Later on, we just changed the prices to 2,500. We sold more. That's pricing is a mystery to me still after all these years. That was the first experience. It's also an experience where we actually, as a business, we failed. I have a few of these in my career. Occasionally you fail, and sometimes you win. And I think 3 times in my career we were too early, way too early. This was in '99, 2000. The iPod, I think, came in 2001, 2002. So it was just too, and our product was also connected via Wi-Fi, was brand new then, on your home network. And I mean, when did Google Home take off? That was like 3-4 years ago. So we were definitely way too early.
And so the next startup, which again is, you later describe it as being too early, is you created the world's first live streaming from mobile phone. That was back when Nokia was still number 1, if I remember correctly. Can you share with the audience? And there you were the founder. So can you? Yeah,
that was Kite was the company name, and that was pre-iPhone. Who remembers the Nokia N95? Wow, a lot. It was a very popular phone pre-2007. And then 2007 the iPhone came. We launched actually the beginning of 2007, raised money in 2006. Yeah, we were the first guys streaming live video from a mobile phone, which was technically very complicated because you didn't have LTE and fast networks, so we wrote our own transcoders and what have you back then, and then you could integrate it directly into MySpace. We all remember MySpace, right? Facebook came later, where it became big, and you could also live chat, upload photos, and all the things you can do today on either Facebook, Instagram, or wherever. But well, timing is very important too. It was 2007. There just wasn't enough adoption yet for that. It was a phenomenal experience. I mean, the learning were invaluable. Luckily, with both of those companies, we found a home, we found an acquirer. Again, financially not a super success, but it was okay. Everyone got a job, and everyone did really well afterwards in their careers.
And so after that, you decided to go into join some of the big giants, and Google was the first ones who found you and recruited you. And maybe you can share quickly with the audience. I don't think many know that you were working on the Google Maps. I guess, like, how many of you are using Google Maps on your phone?
Please, everybody, right?
Yeah, my question was like, how many are not using it? I should have asked the other way around. So, if I understand correctly, a big portion of that we should be thankful to you. So maybe you can explain like what was like your team working on and the project.
Well, I wasn't a founder of Google Maps, and it wasn't me. It was a large team behind it. When I joined Google Maps, it's an interesting story, and I heard this is being live streamed, so I'll make sure it's public friendly. If you want to know more details, you can ask me afterwards over a beer. But I'll tell you the story, which was very interesting. In 2012, I was asked to help with Android Maps. Google, of course, founded Android, and Google Maps on Android was very, very successful. Google Maps on the iPhone was developed by Apple. It was called Google Maps, but it was developed by Apple. It was just a data deal. They used Google Maps data, but the application was done by Apple. The understanding was that at some point, location is so strategic, and of course today it's like, oh, of course, but this was back in 2012. We thought at some point Apple's going to do their own thing. It makes only sense. It's so important, and we thought we have some time to do that. And I started building an iOS team. And we thought, yeah, we have a little more than a year or so to build from ground up an iOS experience. And a month later, Apple announced Apple Maps. And we were like, oops, we don't have a year. And it was quite interesting. Of course, you can't then just say, okay, in a month we have something, because we really built this from the ground up. And what we did was something very interesting which happened. I'm not sure I ever talked about it in public, was instead of a year, I didn't talk to the top level executives, and I said, hey, we clearly want to be faster than a year. How about we do it in half a year? So by the end of the year, we'll have a brand new Google Maps on iOS, which has never been created before. But in order for us to succeed, I want to run this like a startup within Google. That means we'll never do an executive review. And it's not to hide or anything like this. At Google, you work with a lot of different stakeholders for all these important projects, and they agreed. So we never had a review, and we ran like a little startup within Google, which was an absolute dream. We launched in December 2012, exactly 5.5 months later. I think to this day, it's the most successful app launch in history. We had 10 million downloads of our V1 in 48 hours. It helps if your competitor is not doing so well and people got lost and all that. So by the way, Apple Maps caught up a lot. Today it's a lot better, but Maps is really all about data. So that was an absolute amazing experience.
Thank you one more time for bringing that experience to us. Then you joined Twitter, and after that was quite short period, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it wasn't a romance. It lasted half a year. Twitter, I think, is a very important platform. It always has been, and I thought there's a lot I could bring to that platform and move. And unfortunately, when I arrived, some of the people who were close to me, who brought me there, after a few weeks, they were not there anymore. There was a lot of turmoil, and it just was a culture that didn't fit with my culture, and it didn't work out. And occasionally that happens. And then within half a year, I left that company.
And then you joined Uber as to run their marketplace.
Yeah.
And so, couple of words about the Uber. Everyone, like in Latvia, Uber is not very popular. We use Bolt.
Yep.
They do not have, but I'm sure most of the people have tried Uber at least once. Pretty much the same thing as Bolt or any other of these apps. So even though this is public, can you share one crazy story from the Uber times? I know there are plenty of them, but just if you can pick one.
Now I have to relive my Uber experience. You read all the headlines, I had to live through it. It wasn't always easy. I remember one experience. So I joined to help lead the marketplace. Marketplace at Uber is it's kind of the brain of Uber. That's where pricing happens, dynamic pricing. That's where the matching happens. So if you request a car, we'll make sure it's the right car at the right time, and that's where the positioning, the recommendations to drivers happens, all that stuff. A lot of data science, a lot of math, and we weren't happy. Well, let's say it that way. My boss back then, Travis, wasn't happy about how certain performances were of the marketplaces. And the marketplace, Uber is real time, it's in the physical world, it's very dynamic. If something goes wrong, it's real bad. That means if there's not enough drivers at a certain location at a certain time, things can go wrong very quickly, because then suddenly you wait 10 minutes or more, or even worse, there's no car available for you. Like in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, on a typical morning, there's way over 10,000 cars on the road, on the Uber system. And you need to balance that in a way, right? Where is the demand, at what time, and where's the supply, at what time? So you do this with pricing and several other things. So things didn't work so well for a while, because back then some of our algorithms were still, there's a lot of manual work was still being done. So we had to come at 6 in the morning. We're sitting with Travis in a room. We were watching live the morning commute, and had to tune our parameters live while Travis was pacing around us. And that was definitely a memorable experience.
Sounds like radio tuning.
Yeah, there was, a lot of it was done manually in the early days, not anymore now. Now it's fully automated and tuned. I mean, Uber, what's interesting about Uber, there's a lot of things interesting, but what's very interesting is Uber was really more of a, in the beginning, and I'm sure some people would disagree with me, it was less of a tech company, it was more of an operations company, you know, and what it was all about was to have your playbooks, and a playbook is nothing else than writing down your processes. If you open a new city, what does it take to open a new city? And a lot of it you really can't just do with human power. So you have folks there, they recruit writers, folks there, they recruit drivers, and then even in the very beginning, there was no search pricing or dynamic pricing, anything like that. And then when they did search pricing, in the beginning it was manual, like, oh, there's not enough drivers, let's crank up the price for the entire city. You know, it's like, and today this is all fully automated, it's block by block and all that, but that's how it started, and then slowly from a more ops-driven company became more of a product-driven company over the years.
When we were talking on our video chat the other day, you mentioned that you built, or you were part of building the data science team at Uber to something like 700 people, if I remember correctly.
I don't know if those are public numbers, but you just said it.
Okay. So you were a big part of building this data science team in the marketplace.
Yes, I mean, data science, Uber is a dream for a data scientist. Who is a data scientist here? Nobody? I heard it's
one.
Okay, you're in the hottest career here, so everyone else, you should think about it. I think it's so fascinating. When I joined at Uber, by the way, the good lesson learned. When I joined Marketplace, I barely knew what data science was. Maybe I pretended to a little bit. I bought a book on Amazon, read it, but and then I got to know it, truly what data science means, what it does. And
can you explain to the rest of the people?
Yeah, I mean,
that's still a fuzzy term for many of us.
What data science is you build, first of all, several things. Data science, as it is today, wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago. You operate algorithms on very large data sets. So if you have massive amounts of data sets, you run algorithms, you get patterns out. Of course, you hear every company today is AI-powered, ML-powered. That's a buzzword that has to do with data science, that has to do with recognizing certain patterns. And to do that in real time is very, very tricky. So for a data scientist, and usually those folks have a background in math, in stats, and sometimes physics, a lot of times economics as well. And for a data scientist, Uber is so interesting because your models, what you're doing, it's all in the real world. It's in the physical world. You look at this map and you see these cars moving around. You see you see those dots shining. That means someone just opened the Uber app, and it's like there's the cars moving. How do we get them together? How should we direct them? Which car should be for whom and all that? That's a dream for a data scientist. And yeah, I was very fortunate to work with that. I got exposed to data science, and I think we built I would say the Uber data science team is one of the top 5 in the world now, because we were able to attract the best talent there. So it was an amazing experience, yeah.
Last question from me. On your LinkedIn website, you say less is more, and I know you have a bigger idea behind this, so can you share this with the rest in this room?
Yeah. It doesn't apply to beer, so and actually, so James did his research. It sounds like the way it's written is this way. So I really like this. This writing. What it comes down to is, and by the way, I did not invent this. A designer who worked with me at one of my startups, he heard it from a friend who saw it as a graffiti somewhere, and it's just a lot of things we approach in technology and actually in life. We make it a little bit too complicated. So just simplify it, do a little fewer things, and usually it's better. Remember in the early days, mobile phone apps, they were so complicated, had 5 menus and everything. You could just get lost 100 times, and you could make it so much easier. It's not easy to do this. It's very, very hard. When we did Google Maps on iOS first and later on Android as well, we actually, which was very interesting, if you would think, we had Android out there, hundreds of millions of people use it already. And then on the iOS side, you're like, oh, you're under time pressure. You only have 5 months. What would you do first? You would just port the same experience over to iOS, because like, oh yeah, it works there. Let's do it there. We did the opposite. We were like, it's so cluttered and so much legacy in there in that Android experience. We got an opportunity. Let's take a step back and imagine with these new phones, like the new iPhones and the new smartphones back then, how would you approach the experience? And we only had 5.5 months, so there's certain things we had to strip out, and we just didn't do. In the beginning, the first half year on iOS, you could not upload a photo or write a review, or you couldn't get transit data, and we just had to focus on the main things. What's most important for a map application? You first want to know where you are. That's the blue dot. Where am I? And the second thing is, where do I want to go? You find a place. And how do I get there? Those are the 3 basic things. And yes, it would be great if you could add a review, add a photo and all that, but that just wasn't fundamental in the beginning. So in order for us to hit the timeline, we took something out. That's just one example. This can be applied to so many things. how you communicate, how you do process, and what have you. So, yeah.
Perfect. That was the introduction about Daniel. And so the rest 45 minutes, Daniel, I give the floor to you. So you can run your own way. How do you want to do this? And so, yes, let's spend 45 minutes learning from Daniel as much as we can.
Let's keep it very interactive. It is not learning you from me, it's learning from each other. So I love to hear from you as well. And by the way, James, I think we need a less is more t-shirt from Printify. So can I do that? So what I was thinking is, instead of giving you just like a PowerPoint presentations or anything like that, is what's easier is let's capture some themes you want to talk about. I'm no expert in anything particular, I'm no professor, but I'm happy to share the experiences, what worked, what didn't work in my past, in my experience. So what I would say is you just ask any questions or topics you want to talk about, and then I will write them down here on this whiteboard, and then we just there's then probably going to be some clusters, what the topics, the themes are about, and then we're going to pick one after another and we just talk about it. If that works for you, we can do that. I see some nodding, so I'll just open it up to you. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to hear? By the way, very important, I saw there it still says that I'm the VP product at Uber. I'm not at Uber anymore. I left until about 2-3 months ago. I was an advisor still there, but I left about a year ago. So what I'm doing now primarily is help startups, invest in startups. I work with several venture capitalists, and I'm a very proud investor, obviously, of Printify as well. So that's what I do today. But let's open up. Yes?
So I'm a founder of a startup, and thinking about putting together the data science team, putting together the team at iOS team at Google Maps, you're looking for people who have better expertise than you have in technology. You're looking for skills that are difficult to capture in an interview, so leadership. You're looking for culture match. How do you hire?
Okay. Yeah, recruiting, that's super interesting. Yeah. Okay.
I actually have also a co-founder of a startup. Two questions. One is, what are the main roles in a product team?
Yep.
And the other one is, nowadays you have a lot of products when they have to be built, there are a lot of different competences that have to come together. You know, there's like data part, there's like tech part, there can be some research part that has to be there. So how do you integrate into the product team different functions? Do you put them on one team working together on a specific solution, or do you separate them by function?
Yeah, it's kind of related, right? It's kind of related, right? Those questions, yeah. Okay. Okay. Next. Just
Yeah.
whoever.
It's two questions, but they're really similar. So the first one is, what are the main criteria for deciding what are the most important features for a product? And the second one is, what are also your main criteria of deciding when to reject a potential new feature which has positive feedback but may not be, focused to the most important part of the product?
Daniel, since not everyone has a microphone, the rest of that, it would be nice if you could repeat the
Yeah, I will repeat. So, okay. So it's all around product. So the very first question was around talent and recruiting, what to look for, how if you don't have skills in data science, how do you test on data science? The next few questions were related to product. What are the different roles in a team? How do the different functions work together? When you launch a new product, what are the most important features? How do you decide reject features? I guess that's related also to less is more. Okay, next one.
I have one.
Yep.
It's quite a small one, actually. So at Uber, you also have a lot of data, statistics about drivers and all of this. So how do you use this data to forecast the demand for rides? And are there any interesting insights around that? For example, if you know that it will be raining tomorrow, what do you do about it?
Yep. So I can talk a little bit about it, not too detailed, obviously, but
Yes, I'm interested.
it was just like data. What do you do with data at Uber? For example, in forecasting, what do you take into account? What's the approach there? Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
In the back. Yeah.
When and if you can outsource part of the product, is it possible and when you can do
What do you mean by outsource?
it? Not part of the team, part of the core team.
You mean to another company for development?
Like dev house.
Ah, okay. Yeah, yeah. That's kind of just, I'm going to have team here, and then so the question was, when can you outsource your development, if you want to do that at all? Outsource. Okay? When? Okay?
A bit related on that, we are in robotics and obviously multidisciplinary, complex, so we rely a lot on third-party provided, sometimes open source, sometimes
Yep.
proprietary software, and sometimes we struggle with things that we know are on the roadmap of a platform provider, but then at the same time we want it kind of earlier,
Yeah.
and
So
we're dying to work on it. So how do you figure
So-
out where it's worth investing your
Yeah.
resources, and where you just want to wait until the platform provider will make it available basically to the entire ecosystem?
So the question was around third-party dependencies versus internal development. When do you decide and all that? Yep. Okay. Next.
How do you scale product teams?
Huh. How do you scale product teams? Is it, you mean teams in general, technology teams? Product alone doesn't really help, so I'm just going to say, how do you scale teams, right? How to scale, okay. Sure.
So when you pass some tasks to the more technical part of your team, what's a good input? Is it a wireframe? Is it a specification on those slides? Is it a clickable prototype? What's the best practice in your experience?
Yeah, so the question is, what do you use, what tools to use to document product and hand over your requirements or whatever it is, tools in product management basically, yeah. Okay?
How do you decide to buy another company when some services is related with the product? For example, I would like to give the example from the Pioneer, the pictures on the Google Maps, and it was absolutely different view. They just pointing the pictures on the GPS coordinates, but later Google bought it. In such examples, what is the main point of the companies to acquire, to get such second and the third products?
Yeah, so the question is around your own data versus third party related to acquisitions as well, right? Yeah. Okay. Next. Anyone?
I had a question regarding setting objectives for products. In particular, I would like to know what would be kind of the strategy, how you do it, and the edge would be like whether it be like should be top-down driven or bottom-up.
So the question is around product planning, objectives. I just write planning, and I was smiling at James because we just talked about it before we came in here. OKRs. Okay, let's do a couple more and then we get started.
Question about how do you decide if it's too early for this?
You asked the wrong guy. The question was like, how do you decide if it's too early?
You do
No, it's yeah. It's basically what's timing.
Yeah,
The right timing, right? Basically, yeah. Okay.
To what extent, as a product manager for a software product, you should know coding?
Oh, should a PM
Yes.
be technical in code? Yeah. By the way, it doesn't just have to be about product. And you can ask me about startups, funding, anything. I don't care. Yep.
Why Uber is still #1 worldwide? Maybe product is better than that.
Why is Uber still number one?
Yeah.
Why not? Okay. Yep.
So let's say you're new to product management. What are the key things we should focus on, given that you just like been assigned this role really early?
Yep. So if you're new PM, what to focus on? Yep. Should we do one more? Anyone? You just did. A woman. Thank you.
About pricing.
Sorry.
You mentioned that in your first startup, the price was too low. When you went higher, it was sold better. So can a low price affect?
Yeah. How do you approach pricing in products, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's get started. Surprise, surprise, most questions around product. Let's get started there. And then we got questions around product, a little bit about talent, about Uber, about data, and about team, and we can add more later on if there's time. Yeah, let's start with product. And I'm just looking which one makes sense first. Let's first talk about the people aspect. So the people aspect started like, how technical should a PM be? That's usually I've done a lot better when people have a technical background, but that doesn't mean you have to have studied computer science or anything like that. Because you just relate a lot better with engineers, with data scientists. You have an idea what it takes to build a feature. I know product managers, sometimes they still go in the code and do certain things themselves. I think that has changed potentially a little bit, where for certain areas you don't have to be super technical and get into the code. But mostly, I mean, if a product manager cannot run his or her own queries, for example, get their data back and see how the product is doing, I think then you have an issue. I think it's very important because the product manager, at the end of the day, he or she is not building things. It's like you're this conductor who brings all these disciplines together, and if you don't understand, don't have a sense of what these other disciplines can contribute, and where also the limitations are, then it gets very difficult, and you might not be taken serious anymore. So, which is kind of related to the different roles in a team, the different functions. In a traditional software company, and there's hardware and software as well. With robotics, you have hardware as well many times. I mean, it's, as I mentioned, the product person is usually kind of this conductor who helps aligning things, who tries to bring in process. And now when I say process, everyone is like, no, I don't want process. Process has a very bad reputation. It's not bad. Process means nothing else than enabling efficient communication. Like if you and I had a startup together, our process would be, we sit in the same room at the same table. That's it. We don't need more. If you have 50 people, you need a little bit more. You might do some OKR planning or whatever you have. So, and the different functions, when they're, you know them, right? Of course, engineering makes everything possible. That's the foundation of everything. Data science makes sense of it. Design brings the delightfulness into the picture, and the connection to our users. User research is also very important. Who understands user behaviors. You have also then data science. I mentioned you have data analytics. There's a difference there. Data science, they do modeling and algorithms and all that. Data analytics, they're making sense of the data you have, where you have your KPIs and all those things. I forgot the product marketing. That's also very important. A lot of time that's forgotten. You can have the best technology if people don't understand it or don't get the message right. That's very, very important as well. So I think those are the main functions. And really the product manager's job is to get those creators together in the most efficient way and then get out of the way. I think that's kind of when you succeed. All right, next one. Let's talk about, okay, features, reject features, timing. I think those are kind of all going hand in hand. Pricing. So what are the most important features? I mean, whatever gets you adoption, I mean, I really, there's no magic answer here. What's your key value proposition? I think that's the key. So we had this discussion earlier today as well, where you have to think about, you need your framework. How do you get to a feature and what's important? You're starting with mapping your space. What are the market trends? What are your stakeholders, right? At Uber, it's drivers, it's riders, it's Uber as a company, of course, as well. So it's kind of a free-sided marketplace. What are your stakeholders? And then you go through use cases, and then you prioritize. And at the end of the day, then you of course, engineering is in the room as well. And if priority number 1 takes you 5 years and priority number 2 takes you 1 month, it's pretty clear that priority number 2 probably should be done first. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The key is, it's straightforward, but when you have all these different disciplines together, everyone has a different idea. It's not always that easy. And what helps most is have frameworks which you just follow. And what's helping there best is really, is OKRs. If you don't know about OKRs, I highly recommend you look into it. It's objectives and key results, and that's related to planning, and that's where you figure out with what you're going to do for the next quarter, the next year. And what's very important here, this is a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So top-down, your management team, your founders, they have an idea about their North Star, about their vision, about basically Uber could be, we want to be in every city in the world with more than 100,000 people living, there should be Uber. That could be a North Star, right? And then you start like, what does it take to get there, right? Then you have your objectives. Well, one objectives could be in England, in the top 10, in England, we want to be the number 1 shared ride service for this year. And then you have the special KRs, what you can measure. That means in London, we want to move from 10,000 drivers to 100,000 drivers. So that's your planning. And then the top down, you have like 3 to 5, never more. 3 to 5 OKRs from your management team. Usually you do them annual because that lays out, you have your strategy, and then you lay out your top level OKRs, and then all the teams do then the bottom up planning with their OKRs. Their OKRs are feeding into the top level OKRs. For example, at Uber, there's the top level OKRs. We want to get that many rides in London. And then the driver team has specific OKRs on the driver side. The rider team has specific OKRs on the rider side. And at the end of the day, you get one big picture together. And I'm a big fan of once a year big strategic planning. It's almost October. You start this around October for the next year, so for 2020. And then you adjust, you review and adjust potentially mid-year. Every company has to find its own groove. I noticed to do 4 times a year planning at Google was too much for me, for my taste. So twice a year, bigger planning, and then you can do minor adjustments. You can, as a startup, you always do that. You can do that on a weekly basis as long as you hold yourself accountable and you stick to your, I assume you stick to your KPIs, your performance indicators. So I think there's amazing tech talks online from Google about OKRs. I think this is so important. And you don't have to overdo it with processes and all this. Put it in a spreadsheet and be done with it. And then what we did a lot, each team at Uber they were allowed to do whatever they wanted, how they track them. We didn't get involved how you track it, except at the end of the quarter. And a lot of teams, what I liked the most when teams did like a traffic light reports, they had a spreadsheet with their OKRs, and then all you had is yellow, green, and red. Red means something's really wrong with this KR. Management team usually got involved in that as well. Yellow means it's getting tricky, we're not quite on track. Green means we're on track. And when you do that on a weekly basis, it takes you 5 minutes to update your OKRs for your team. Everyone has visibility, full transparency for the entire company into all OKRs. I think is very, very powerful. So that, I hope I kind of answered what are the most important features. Also what to say no to. I talked a little bit about that before already. How do you, the tools in product management, well, there's, I mean, this is really, it's based on taste again. Don't go overboard, don't go too crazy. A lot of companies are just in Google Sheets and Google Docs. You can do everything in those. A lot of people now are using tools like, you might have heard Coda or Airtable. They can do a little more, or you can do, there's Asana. I mean, there's just tons of tools. Monday is a new one, a new planning tool. So it depends what works. Don't go overboard. It's never about how fancy the tool is. It's just how little effort it takes to update. And a lot of times it really just comes back to updating a spreadsheet. One cell is just pretty straightforward if you do planning. Very important in product planning when we talk about tools is that you have both, that you have the in-depth understanding of what it's all about when you talk about new feature, but then also that you have a very good abstract and executive summary. And a lot of times people get lost in between, so I think that's very important. So that's on the tool side. And by the way, if you have an opinion, you have a question, so always interrupt. This shouldn't be a one-way street. How do you approach pricing? I think that depends so much on the industry. It's very, very tricky. At Uber, of course, you want equilibrium in your marketplace, right? That supply and demand is balancing out. And you can do this with pricing. If prices go up, more drivers will come. All drivers, they can turn on and off the app whenever they want. So if prices go up, more drivers come on because there's more money to be made. If prices go up, let me finish, I'll come back to you in a second. If prices go up, less riders will use Uber. They're looking at it, whoa, that's a little too expensive. I'm not going to use Uber right now. And they might be a little bit out of balance. So that's where dynamic pricing comes in. And dynamic pricing is temporal, so it's based on time and geospatial. So if you have, I'm sure you have a football stadium somewhere here, and there's a match there, the situation is very different. Actually, if you look at the demand curve and the supply curves, an hour before the match till the match starts, and then during the match, and by the way, if the home team is losing, a lot more people ask already for an Uber before the match is over. There's very interesting things you can see out of data there. So, and price, that's at Uber, how pricing worked. It really depends. The beauty today is it's so easy to test. And that was also nice with Uber. When you're in 600 cities, each marketplace is independent there, and you can run A/B tests there as well. At a marketplace, at a real-time two-sided marketplace, it's not always easy to run tests. You always have to do the whole market. You can't just do pricing for the half of the market. That you don't get real results there. But then we just picked a smaller city somewhere, and we did some experiments there, what works in terms of new features and stuff. You had a question.
You have the stable formulas for defining the prices. For example, New York, Riga, Istanbul, when we compare all these different cities, they have their own economical standards are the different.
So the question was, is there stable pricing for certain, let's say, New York to Washington, D.C. or so, or something like that? No, there is a formula, of course, where it's like time and distance based. Like if there's no traffic, nothing, you pay per minute this much, you pay per mile or kilometer this much. You pay a certain safety fee, you have to pay taxes, so that you can calculate your price. It's hardly ever that you get exactly that price, which is the price by the book, because the conditions are really never like the book. It could be that there's really, if you go from A to B, and let's assume there's not much traffic, we need more drivers on the B place. You go from A to B, so it actually helps us to get a car over to B. So in order for you to more likely use an Uber now and not use an alternative or not go now, we can lower the price a little bit. So there's a higher chance to get a car over there because cars are needed over there. So it's super complicated how this all plays together. And it starts with a basic formula, and there's a fare calculator online where you can see, hey, under very normal conditions, how much would it be? But then all these factors and the data plays in. Yep. All right. New PM, what to focus on? I would say 2 things, 3 things. Number 1 is communication. That's everything with a PM, with most things in life, but especially with a PM, it's being a good listener and being a good communicator, especially be a good listener early on. I think that's most important. How can you empower an engineer and the designer, the data scientist, to get this feature, which you all agreed on, out the door in the most effective time, most effective way? And that means just be a very good listener, get those signals. And that we've experienced that helps. Experience will help a lot. The other thing is, don't boil the ocean, don't go too big. Pick a win which you have. Like if you're a new PM within 100 days, what is your early win? You gain a lot of respect from your peers, from the engineers, and from those folks. And never ever forget, you're in service of all those other functions. You're nothing without the other functions who are actually creating things. So you're serving all the others and try to make things more efficient. Third-party dependencies versus internal development. I think it goes into planning, really, where you prioritize and where you look at it, and of course pricing as well. And sometimes it's if you're dependent on a small firm, like Uber depending on a small data provider, it's just too risky to do that. So you have to do, a lot of times you have to do it yourself. So I think it really depends on the situation. It's a tricky one. That question comes up a lot, but I don't think there's a generic formula. Right timing, as I said, I'm the wrong guy to ask what's the right timing on a product. The beauty today is versus when my last company, we started in 2006. Man, that's 13 years ago. And back then, to build something was so much harder. Today, all the open source tools and how easy it is to create, you barely have to write a line of code to get an app out the door to test something. The entry barrier to create technology today is so much lower. There's so many powerful tools and libraries available today to create product. So I think it's just go out and test. Start small. Start with the less is more approach, and then iterate frequently. Don't create the monster first and then go out. That's very rarely that is the case. Think of your core use case. Try to solve that and then get it out the door.
Daniel?
Yes.
Thinking back about the 2 companies that you said you were too early with.
It was 3.
Okay. Yeah, there was 3. So, do you think that there was something that you could have done that you did not do early on as you were taking that challenge on that would have steered the company towards something that's different and kind of made it a different?
So, the question was, when we were too early in our startups, and it was actually, you're right, it's 2 startups, one time with a big company. Our first company, we were acquired by Philips. Back then it was the world's number 3 in consumer electronics. So we went to build another world's first wireless internet TV in 2002, 2003. And that's what Apple TV is today. We built that, again, way too early. So it's different for a startup and for the big company. The big company knew there's not a massive commercial opportunity at this stage, but they wanted to be an innovator. Philips was one of the Philips, IBM, Siemens were, I think, and Sony, they were the largest patent holders. You know, they wanted to be an innovator, and we were a small team. It wasn't a huge investment for them. So I don't think for them it was that important to to be commercially successful. As a startup, it's the end of your startup if you're too early. What we should have done different. My second startup is we noticed early that people who used it loved it. I mean, we had we then also created apps through a framework for live streaming and all that. So the first Lady Gaga app, the first John Legend app, and all the video streams. I mean, we were there. Our product, I remember this moment, was so phenomenal. John Legend was on stage with the Obamas when President Obama got inaugurated, and he was live streaming with his Nokia N95. It felt so real. You felt so there. It was absolutely tremendous back in those days. I guess that was 2008, 2009, January or something like that. And so we had all those hero cases. We were hiding behind those hero cases in a way, where it's like, yeah, this must become big. But the actual user adoption didn't really take off because people didn't have those phones. What we should have done actually is, because we had such powerful technology around video, we should have taken a step back and pivoted the whole company. Forget about the whole live streaming video. It's not the right time right now, and pivot the company. Instead, we tried and tried and tried, and we were 5 years at it, you know, and that was definitely a mistake. So never be afraid. Take a step back and say, you know what? It's either not the right time, it's not the right market, it's not the right product. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You tried, just not the right thing right now. So yeah, we didn't do that. I think also had a little bit to do with just a little too naive, a little too young. So certain things you just have to go through and experience it yourself. I had to experience it a few times till I really got it. I'm a slow learner. So yeah. Cool. Let's talk about how are we doing in terms of timing? Another 5 minutes?
Well, we can still do 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, we're going to another 10 minutes or so. I think it's very important, talent and recruiting. I want to talk about this. There's never a minute wasted when you spend time on recruiting. No matter what function you are in your company, assuming your company is doing well and you need talent, in our industry, there's simply not enough talent. And it's not even close to be enough talent for what you need. So getting top talent, putting the effort in is everything. I learned a lot at startups, at Google, and then at Uber. I think at Uber we got it down at the end. I was very proud of the process we had. I'll walk you through the product manager recruiting process. And we wanted to make it efficient, but very, very thorough. So we know that we have so much signal if someone comes in the door, this is the right person. And it was very intense. So we do, if you have candidates, of course you do sourcing, candidates and all that, but you have your funnel. The first step was, and we didn't want to waste the candidates' time or our time, but get as much signal as possible. The first thing is just a call or a Zoom call, a video call. Ideally, a person comes in for an hour. You talk about your backgrounds. You talk about just getting a little bit of vibe. You don't know much yet, but you get a little bit of vibe if this could be a great candidate for your company. In that interview, as a product person, always ask some hard questions people don't expect. Because if you just ask, so, tell me about your experience at Microsoft, tell me about your experience at Printify, that everyone can tell that story. And yeah, you talk about that as well, that's important, but ask some other questions. I'll tell you two of my favorite questions. First, my favorite one. I always ask product people, tell me about the product you use, a consumer product you use, first generation product that came to market in the last 2 years. Why do I ask this question? If a product person is not trying out new products and is curious, and it doesn't mean you need to be a super nerd and try everything new all day. If you haven't tried a new product in 2 years and you haven't even thought about it, you're probably not a good product person. And I had people in 2017, I'm like, tell me about a product. And if someone then says, the iPhone. I'm like, well, the iPhone is 10 years old. Well, the latest generation, I'm like, well, it's not really a new product. You know, it has to be a truly new product. I'm just thinking back of my mind, what is it for me right now? So I have one, but it's the GPS tracker for my dog. It's really which is an amazing product. And then, so that was my first question there. And related to that question, then ask, tell me what you like about. So clearly you're an early adopter to it. Tell me what you like about. And then you're the head of product. What would you do with this product? Because an early product, there's always things to improve. If you're an early adopter, you have always an opinion about it. So that's my first question, which I think always, what I want to say with this is it catches people a little bit off guard. That's first. Let's just leave it at that question. So that's the first step. Only one person is involved. It's only 1 hour. You get some signal. And then the next step, that's a very, very important one. And by the way, this doesn't apply to everyone. That's just how it worked for us. So I'm just going to write it down. So the first thing was a phone screen. Is this important? Is this interesting or not? So should I? Okay. So the second thing was actually, we called it a jam. There's nothing else than a brainstorm. So the person comes into the office for 1.5 hours. There's several disciplines in the room, usually 3 people, obviously a PM, sometimes 2 PMs, and an engineer or a data scientist. And you talk, whiteboard, nothing there. Then you talk about an Uber problem, and I don't expect the candidate to know everything about Uber. That's not what it's about. What this session, I'll give you an example. Uber at a football game. What do you think are the challenges? What do you think, how should we approach this? You know, and then you just sort with a whiteboard. And then I want to see if the candidate starts with something, oh, prices are too high, or takes a step back. Oh, at a football game, there's probably let's start with the problems first. The problem could be there's no parking, there's a lot of people who want to leave at the same time, there's not enough drivers, how do the drivers know about it, blah, blah, blah. You just write all this thing down, and then you can go from there. So, but it's really a jam, and it gets the candidate into a little bit out of his or her comfort zone, which I think is very important. We got most signal out of the jam, because there's a lot of people who talk product, but can't really live it, and then they didn't need to know data science or anything. It's just a lot of common sense. How do you interact? You're allowed to ask questions as well. How do you play this in a team situation? So that's where you get the most signal. Third was a homework. You're like, what? I'm out of school. Why do I have to do a homework? So this is pretty intense. You give also a problem about your company usually, where then the candidate prepares homework, and the candidate, it took about 8 to 10 hours to prepare it. It's a lot of time you commit, but you know what? If you're going to spend the next 4 to 6 years at this company, it should be worth a day of your time. If you really, by the way, you already made the jam, right? So you're already like, I like this kind of environment, this vibe, the problem. So you do the homework, you create a presentation or a document, however. You then come in, that's your interview day. One session, 90 minutes, is where you present your homework. So you're not caught off guard. Present homework, and there's Q&A around that. Then there's the traditional one-on-one interviews with one with HR, one with engineering, 2 with other product people, sorry. That's basically after this day. And after that, you have so much, and by the way, all this is always, when you make a decision on a person, it's always decided in a committee. There's not a single person who's like, yes, I'm going to bring her in, I'm going to bring him in. It's almost committee-based. You always have to write up your notes about the interview, what went well, what not. Is it a cultural fit or not? Because certain cultures don't fit certain folks. I mean, there's sometimes a cultural mismatch as well. And then it's the decision. This is intense, it's a lot of work, but I thought this is kind of, if I went back to a company to work, I think I would do exactly this again. We got so much signal of that. And I think the question around this was also, what if you don't have the background? You don't need, in your interview day, if someone is a data, if the interview is for a data scientist, there's a couple deep dives with data scientists. There's always a one-on-one with an engineer where you talk architectures and systems as well. So there's deep dives there. You personally might not have to, you might not have to know all the details on certain things. So yeah, I think I'm just going to dodge the bullet and leave the, well, I can do this real quick. The team, well, why is Uber still number one? Well, they're doing it best still, right, compared to everyone else. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's very hard to do it right and at scale. Very, very hard, which is the next question. How do you scale? How do you scale a team? How do you scale a team is with the right process. Not too much, not too little. I told you, if the two of us started a company tomorrow, our process would be we're both in the same room. If you're now at 50 people, 80 people, 100 people, you probably need OKRs, you need proper planning. I call this cadence. Cadence is the rhythm how you run your company. I highly recommend a weekly all hands where you share as much as you can with your company, very open, transparent Q&As. There's a cool tool, it's called Slido. I'm not affiliated with them, but we used it at several companies where the audience, there's a lot of times when you do Q&As, the loudest voice in the room asks most questions, which is not always best. So this allows you via your phone, just a mobile browser, and then people can up and down vote questions. You can do anonymous or not. Anyway, a weekly all hands I think is important. One-on-ones with your direct reports or with your boss weekly, try to do them. And if you're a manager, this is not your meeting, this is your team members' meeting. That half hour is not your time. And there's only, I learned this from one of my first bosses, there's really only, to be a good manager, there's two questions you should, I ask. The first thing is, how are you? You know, and sometimes you have your team member just sitting like that. I'm like, okay, he just doesn't want to talk today. It's probably not the right time or so. A lot of times, and then if the person decides to open up, he or she will tell you, you know, how are you? And then the second thing is, how can I help? Those are really the two fundamental questions as a manager you ask from one of your direct reports. So I said all hands weekly, one-on-ones weekly, and then you do deep dives on the certain product tracks. You do that weekly. You communicate openly your OKRs and where you're at. And that does a lot to scale. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but I think that does a lot to scale. Yeah, I think with that, everyone is ready for a beer, or?
Yes. So Daniel, huge thank you for sharing your knowledge and information with us. You are very welcome to stick around, enjoy some beers, network chat, and let's give some big round of applause to Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope I get to see the city a little bit now. So he promised me a night walk in the old town, so we'll see. Cool.
Thanks, Daniel.
No problem.